Romans chapter 1, beginning in verse 8. First, I thank my God through Jesus Christ for you all, that your faith is spoken of throughout the whole world. Paul often in his letters, in the beginning of his letters, thanks God for the church that he's writing to. And we'll notice that most of the times when he talks about praying, or maybe even all the times he talks about praying and thanking God, he refers to good things that they're doing. We don't find Paul praying for someone that's not doing well, but rather praying for those that are doing well. So he's thanking God for this church at Rome. So he's writing to Christians and he's thanking God that their faith is spoken of throughout the world. A true sign of someone's having faith is that they are doing things that are visible, that they have faith. We should be able to live a life that people can see our faith. Not just that we have to tell them, but that we can show them by our life that we actually have faith, that they can actually talk about our faith. Yes, it comes in our words as well. When we're sharing the gospel of Jesus with others, our faith is being demonstrated, but our faith is demonstrated both in what we say and what we do. He says in verse 9, "For God is my witness, whom I serve with my spirit in the gospel of his Son." Paul wasn't just outwardly trying to conform to the will of God, but he was serving God from the Spirit, from within. There was something motivating him from the inside to serve God, the gospel of his Son. That without ceasing I make mention of you always in my prayers. So Paul was a continual prayer warrior for other Christians. He uses the word without ceasing, praying always. Those types of terms are found all throughout the scriptures. Making requests, so this is one of the things that he's praying to God, making requests to come unto them, that he would have a prosperous journey to come unto them. Why? He says, for I long, verse 11, I long to see you, that I may impart unto you some spiritual gift, to the end ye may be established. So here we have a church that has strong enough faith that it's spoken of throughout the whole world, and yet Paul says he wants to come and give them a spiritual gift to the end that they might be established. So we should never come to a place where we don't desire spiritual gifts. We should never come to a place where we don't desire to be more established than what we were the day before. Paul is writing to a church that seems to be doing really well. Again, faith spoken of throughout the whole world. And yet he says he wants to impart unto them a spiritual gift, so that to the end that they might be established in what they believe. So that should be our heart's desire for our own selves and for other believers, is that they wouldn't just start in the faith, but also grow in spiritual gifts and be established in those things. Verse 12, that is, that I may be comforted together with you by the mutual faith both of you and me. So he's not saying that he's the only one that has something to give to them. He's also saying that they have something to give to him. So he's hearing about this church in Rome, and he's saying, I want to come and give what I can and also receive what I can. And that, again, should be the heart desire of all believers, is that when they come together with a church, that they share that testimony, that they both want to receive and give. And I've heard so many brothers and sisters share testimonies at the church at Niagara here, and where they say something along the lines of, I want to be open to be spoken to, and I want to give what I can give. And that's it's the true heart of a Christian, is to comfort and be comforted, to have this unity that only Christ can give. Verse 13, Now I would not have you ignorant, brethren, that oftentimes I purposed to come unto you, but was led hitherto, that I may have some fruit among you also, even as among other Gentiles. So he says, he wants to clarify, I've tried coming to you. It's not that I'm ignoring you. And we ought to be having the same spirit when we hear of a zealous group of believers some distance away. We ought to have a desire to be with them and to grow with them. And he says that I might have some fruit among you also. So he's saying, quite honestly, something that we might not easily say, let's say there's a church in Kitchener that's doing really, really well, and they're fruitful, and then I want to also go and take part in that fruit, and also create more fruit. And I would call them up and say, look, I'm hearing that you're fruitful, and I want to go and I want to be part of that too. I want to help to bring fruit in that area as well. That's what Paul was doing. He was desiring to go to them, to cause some spiritual gift, establish them, and cause more fruit to abound among these brethren. What a beautiful heart Paul has. He says, I am a debtor both to Greeks and to barbarians, both to the wise and unwise. See, the Roman people, they were considered to be wise in the sight of the world compared to the Jews, which were off-scouring people. And yet, the Jewish people, they would have considered the Roman people to be foolish. They would consider them to be inspired by God, the Jews, and anyone else were considered to be dogs. Paul is saying here that there's no difference. He, as a Jew, was writing to Romans and wanting to be part and have fellowship with these Romans and saying that, look, I'm a debtor both to Greeks and to barbarians, both to wise and to the unwise. Then he says, so as much as is in me is, I am ready to preach the gospel to you that are at Rome also. This here is an interesting verse. He's writing to people that have embraced the gospel and have brought abundant fruit in their lives, so much that their faith is spoken of throughout the whole world. And yet he's saying, I am ready to preach the gospel, not to others that are at Rome, but he says to you that are at Rome also. It's interesting. The gospel for the believers. Most of the times when we think about the gospel, we're thinking about just how to get saved. We're not thinking about how to bring fruit and how to increase and how to add to and how to build on, how to strengthen and encourage. But the gospel, it is just as much for the believers. It is the good news of Jesus Christ and all that it entails. The gospel is not just sins forgiven. It's sins forgiven and adoption. And it's not just sins forgiven and adoption, but it's sins forgiven, adoption, and to be commissioned, to be given power, and so much more. Then he says in verse 16, for I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ. So he says he wants to go preach, and he says, I'm not ashamed of the gospel. What makes a person not ashamed of the gospel? What makes people ashamed of the gospel? Well, what will make a person ashamed to proclaim the gospel is if they really don't believe the power that it has. But if we believe the power of the gospel, then we will do things to proclaim the gospel to others. That's what he says here in verse 16. He says, for I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ. Why? For it is the power of God unto salvation to every one that believeth. To the Jew first, yes, and also to the Greek, for both. He's not saying the gospel has to first go to Jewish people and then the Greek. He's just saying that it was intended to save the Jews, but then God opened it up to save Greek people as well, and those that are non-Jews, for us. It isn't just for the Jewish people, brother, it's for us, those that are far away from God, aliens. Imagine going into a country that you weren't born in, and the government tends to throw people back out of the country right away. You try to get into this border, you're out, you're not born here, you're not a citizen, you don't belong, you get deported. But then the President of the United States or the Prime Minister of Canada adopts you into his own home, not only causing you to be a citizen, but causing you to be his very own son. So we were all adopted into this beautiful family of God. I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation. It can save us, born again, and daily salvation, and saving us on that day when we enter into glory. We are saved, we're being saved, and one day we'll be saved. We have that hope and assurance that it has happened, and we're just waiting for it all to come to pass the way that God has promised. For therein, in the gospel, is the righteousness of God revealed from faith to faith. So the gospel, in the gospel, the plan of the gospel, the fulfillment of the gospel, the power of the gospel, we find a way that a person can be righteous before God. The righteousness of God is revealed in the gospel. As it is written, the just shall live by faith. This isn't something new. This has always been God's heart and desire, that the just shall live by faith. And in the gospel, the just that believe are justified from all things. God bless you, brother. Hope this has been encouragement. Let's continue to press on. Not be ashamed of the gospel. It is the power of God unto salvation.